Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to call to meeting the meeting of the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. I would like to first recognize President Dan Bradley for welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I will try to make it just remark rather than remarks. I'd like to welcome you officially to the campus. We've had some time over the last day to interact, you and my senior staff. I hope that you come away from this meeting with a better understanding of who we are as a university, what we value, and what we're accomplishing. And that I hope you have good feelings about all those things. But thank you for being with us. I hope that we've met your expectations in terms of a facility as well as in any other things you bring. But welcome. I hope you have a good meeting.
So thank you very much. You and your senior team have certainly been welcoming. Your insights have been thought-provoking. And we look forward to sitting down and having meetings in the future and really to see if we can just look more into some of the thoughts and suggestions that you've given to us. So thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And now I will ask Mr. Peterson if he will do the roll.
Excuse me, be happy to, Mr. Chairman. Jerry Bepko. Here. Dennis Bland.
Present.
John Connett.
Here.
Sarah Carell.
Present.
John Costas. Susana Duarte de Suarez.
Present.
Judd Fisher.
Here.
Lisa Hirschman.
Here.
Al Hubbard. Chris Lamoth.
Here.
Chris Murphy.
Here.
Dan Peterson. John Pop.
Here.
And Karen Whitehouse.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Commissioner.
We have a quorum. And now, as you all know, or as you may or may not know, Sarah Carell's term on the commission comes to a close. And so I want to make a few comments about her, and then we have a resolution. First of all, Sarah, I just want to say how much I have actually learned from you and how much I've been inspired by you and by your presence. Your passion for students, your passion for learning, your passion for higher education, your insight into issues that seem to me to be well beyond your years. You have been a tremendous asset to the commission. You have been a tremendous source of inspiration for me. And I think everything bodes well to our community as long as we have individuals like you who represent the future of our city and of our state, of our nation. So it's been an honor serving with you on the commission.
Here, here.
And there is a resolution. Now we have Susana, she's on the phone, and Susana had agreed to read the resolution. Now, Susana, are you still in a position to do that, or will we have someone else who is actually here to read the resolution?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Unfortunately, I am kind of guilt and I'm unable to.
Please do not read the resolution.
Wouldn't stop a lot of people.
Thank you. Then, with the okay of commission members, I will take the honor of reading the resolution honoring Sarah Carell. Whereas Sarah Carell served with exceptional distinction on the Indiana Commission for Higher Education since her appointment as student representative in 2014, and whereas she was actively involved in the development of the Commission's 2015 to 2017 biennial budget recommendation, and whereas Sarah's valuable contributions to the planning and implementation of the inaugural Two-Day Students Advocates Conference in November 2015 unquestionably made the event extraordinarily successful, with close to 400 attendees focusing on a range of issues, all from a student-centric perspective. And whereas Sarah made valued and strong contributions during her faithful service on the Student Success and Completion Committee and her involvement in the 2015 and 2016 H. Kent Welding Conferences, and whereas her thoughtful participation in the development of the Commission's update of its strategic plan greatly contributed to the visionary nature of reaching higher delivering value, and whereas Sarah was fully engaged in advancing the work of the Commission through her insightful questions and analytical comments on a range of topics, which certainly included but were not limited to the student perspective. Now therefore be it resolved that the Commission for Higher Education expresses its heartfelt appreciation for Sarah Carell's service to the state on behalf of Indiana higher education, including its institutions and students, and wishes her every success in her career and life after the Commission.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The resolution is unanimous. Sarah, thank you so very much. Sarah, we'd like to present a signed copy of the resolution, and if you have comments, we'd certainly love to hear your thoughts.
So this was my first meeting that I ever came to. It was 2 years ago, and I remember being terribly intimidated by it because you guys all had this great kind of jokes going back and forth in the working session, and someone made a golf joke to me, and it went right over my head. And I was so confused. and then in the afternoon, we're in this beautiful room, and I was certain that there was no chance that I would ever fit in with this group. And so I'm just so thankful for you guys and how welcoming you've been and how open to kind of listening to my ideas and how you really made me feel like one of you and truly a part of the group. And I'm glad that this position exists, and I'm excited for the next person to take it. So thank you guys for this opportunity.
You're very welcome, and again, thank you for your service. Any comments from Commission members?
Chair, I'd like to mention something that you already know, but Sarah will become a student at the Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law in the fall, where our chair graduated from just a few years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm excited for it.
I would love to share with you my notes, but none of the laws are any longer in effect.
It's Indiana.
Also, the officers for the positions of chair, vice chair, and secretary of the commission are voted in each year in August. And I have established a nominating committee of commission members to meet and propose a slate of officers for our August meeting, and that meeting will take place immediately after this meeting. So we will certainly try to be conscientious about time, so we can be respectful of those people's times who will hang around afterwards for that meeting. And so now we will turn to the commissioner for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to spend the majority of my time today with highlighting news related to either members of the staff or members of the commission. And first, on behalf of the staff, I would like to join commission members in really offering our genuine appreciation, our gratitude to Sarah Carell for her outstanding service as the student member for the last 2 years. As was already mentioned, she's been a full participant in our work. She's clearly been a great voice for students, but her work has been not limited to the student voice. I mean, she has fully grasped the full range of issues that we're talking about, whether it was the budget or the strategic plan, and been a full contributor to all of our discussions and during her tenure. So we're very grateful. And obviously, you will be missed, but we wish you well. As was also mentioned by the chairman, the names have been submitted to the governor, 3 names for his consideration, and we should be hearing that before our next meeting. Hopefully we'll hear it soon so that we can have an orientation for the new student member and bring that person up to speed so that they can begin to fill in the position that Sarah has held. On the appointment front, we're gratified to know, we were notified just within the last couple days that 2 members of our commission have been reappointed, both whose terms would be up at the end of June, the end of the fiscal year, and that would be Dennis Bland and Dan Peterson, have both been reappointed to 4-year terms, and we're delighted. Speaking of Dennis, I wanted to make a comment for those of you who weren't with us at the State of Higher Education address or didn't have a chance to watch it, and this may have not been covered on the television coverage anyway, but it was my pleasure to stand in on behalf of the governor to present a Sagamore of the Wabash to Dennis at that point for his extraordinary contributions, clearly to the commission, but in so many ways, the work that he's done on behalf of students and young people throughout Indiana. As those of you who know Dennis would imagine, he gave all the credit to other people. He was joined by members of his family, and he shared the honor with members of his family, in particular his father, who was there that day, and who was thrilled, as you might imagine. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Also, I would ask you to join me today in congratulating Karen Whitehouse. I think some of you may know that Karen is accepting a new position. She was all over the Evansville television and newspapers in the last couple days, and she's becoming the Director of Development for the Evansville Vanderburg School Corporation. So her work in K-12 and all the work that we do with college and career readiness, I think will take on a new dimension. The good news is she's able to continue serving in her role as the commission on the commission, so that work will continue, but wanted to say congratulations. Also, I wanted to let you know, President Bradley mentioned, and you know as a part of our strategic plan, we've talked a lot about internships and getting more students to have the opportunity to be interns. I want you to know that we take that seriously at the commission as well, and we have 3 interns this summer. One of our interns, Megan Collier, is here with us today. Megan, if you would stand up, she's, I think, in the next to back row there. She's joined us for the summer along with a couple other students, and we find that the work that they're doing is really so important to us, and they remind us of why we do the work we do as well. So thank you, Megan. Today, we talked a little bit about this last night, but as most of you know, that today is the last official day for Sarah Ansell, who's been serving as an associate commissioner, really responsible for all of our policy work and legislation. I had a chance to make a few comments about Sarah last night, and I've certainly shared those both publicly and privately with her many times. I don't even know where she is. I can't see her. There she is. I felt like I was talking to nobody out there. But yeah, that would be better. But she's, for those of you who don't know, who are in the audience, Sarah has accepted a position at Complete College America where she'll be Vice President for State Policy. So we will have the opportunity to continue to work with Sarah since Indiana will be a part of her portfolio of work. And we won't be shy about asking for that help as well. I had a chance to make some comments, but I mentioned last night that I thought maybe some members of the commission who had an opportunity might want to make a few comments at this point as well, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. I've had the pleasure of working with Sarah and also with many other members of the commission staff over the years, over a lot of years. And I can't say how much I appreciate the good work she's done over the years. She was energized, fun, substantive, professional, and really made some complicated issues pretty simple for those of us that needed simplification. And more importantly, I think she was effective in everything she did representing this commission. And so I, for one, will miss her a lot. I'm glad she's staying in education because I think Indiana and the country will be better because she is in it. And I look forward to hearing great things about her in the years to come. And I look forward to us working with her and making sure Stan lives up to his commitment that she is available to us for as much as we can have her.
Absolutely.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just like to comment also, Sarah, that a couple of times we threw some really hard questions at you and you were unflappable. We tried to unnerve you and could not do it. and I'm using that in parts of my life as well. I think that it's been an honor to work with you. I appreciate your calm demeanor and your ability to, even though we did ask those hard questions, to help us find solutions. And I'm really grateful to you for that. And then if I could also just add, since we're talking about the Sarahs, And Sarah, I wish I had been you at your age.
Wow.
So I really admire you both tremendously. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Jerry.
The Ansel family is well known in Minneapolis, particularly among lawyers, and they're all outstanding people. And the a member of the Ansel family that we've had with us is a great representative of that wonderful family.
Excellent. I just want to echo what Chris Murphy has stated, and even the comments that Teresa made on yesterday regarding Sarah. If Chris Murphy says it, you know he means it. He's not going to mince words. So your impact has been wonderful. And what stands out to me is, even though you were so well prepared and you seemed to make the material seem, it was so cogent and so clear. It was clear that you had prepared so well. And so the word unflappable comes to mind to me. And so I just wish you Godspeed and much success in your work going forward. Thank you for your contributions to the state. Nice. Could we give her a round of applause? And Sarah, I don't know if you want to have comments. Please, thank you.
Sure. I've been doing a lot of reflecting, as I look forward to this transition, and thinking about 5 years ago, I'd never heard of a degree in math. I didn't know what an articulation pathway was. I thought when you get a bunch of people together, it was called a convention, not a convening. And if you asked me what sassy was, I would probably say it was an adjective. But it's really, when I look back, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. I want to thank Teresa so much for taking a chance on me and mentoring me along the way and through this part of my career. It's a rare privilege to be able to learn about leadership by working, up close with Teresa, and I'm going to be forever better for that. You as a commission, you're so active, you're so involved, so engaged. Chris and I were talking last night about certain professors that are, hard on you and ask you tough questions, and, but they make you better. And I said, oh, that's like presenting to the Commission for Higher Education. So I'm flattered that at least my nerves and my flappability didn't show. But you've been a great commission to work with, and just want to thank, my talented and quirky colleagues that have taught me so much, and all the university folks in the room that just have really forever changed me. So I'm just really grateful, and thank you all for your kind words. And it's bittersweet, but I'm sure that we will see each other again, hopefully not too long in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to make a couple more comments in my commissioner's report, just to bring you up to date on a few of our efforts that are underway, very briefly. Just an update on You Can Go Back. We've talked a lot about that in recent weeks. I want to let you know this continues to draw adults. We now have had 16,000 unique hits on our website, and over about 4,000 adults who have provided information to colleges and universities, gone to get a college match. And so, but we know that in order for this program to be successful, we have to keep our foot on the pedal. We can't let up. We have to constantly be in the face of these students to remind, or these prospective students, to remind them of the value of coming back at this point. And we'll keep you up to date on that. The commission is fully engaged and at the table on the ongoing discussions on two important issues that came from the last legislative session. One is the implementation of House Bill 1002, which was the bill that had to do with recruiting high-quality students from high school into the field of education. And we've really been charged with looking at this in a very comprehensive way. And so with that is well underway, as well as we are fully participants at the table with the consideration of what we're going to do with the high school assessment program with ISTEP. And so I'm a member of the ISTEP advisory group, and we've met once, and we'll be continuing to meet. So any good thoughts you have on statewide assessment, I'm open to your ideas. finally, and we've spent a lot of time today already talking about this, but I just want to put in a final plug to those in the audience who might not have been with us this morning to know all that we're doing to ensure the success of our 21st century scholars, and that this really is an all-hands-on-deck effort. We need everyone to help us with this. We heard a lot about the detail this morning, but it's important that we use every method available to us to communicate the message of making sure that our scholars are fully engaged and successful. With that, I complete my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Lubbers, on your report. If there are no questions, comments regarding her report, then I will refer you to your agenda booklet for our meeting minutes, which need approval, and note that we have both March and April's minutes in the book for needing approval. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chair, there's just a few things in here. Maybe I can hand this over later. There's some spelling errors and things I thought we should clean up, but I can do it at a later time. So
Yes,
I
sir.
second it.
So there's a motion and second. We know there's some spelling clarifications or corrections that need to be made. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Minutes are approved. As you all know, our new strategic plan, Reaching Higher, Delivering Value, strives to address the question of college value. Our public square discussion today will focus on the early results of the Gallup Indiana Year 1 survey results. The Gallup Indiana data gathered through the surveys will be incorporated into a comprehensive Indiana College Value Index report available this fall. We will begin with some opening comments given by our commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're excited to have this discussion with you today. You know a lot about the work that's led up to this, and I previewed some of the early results from the survey and the State of Higher Education address in April. But today we're going to get a more complete look at those results statewide. You have been engaged with us for years in actually looking at quantitative data that has to do with the value of education beyond high school. And we believe that this report will allow us to look in a deeper way at the qualitative measures of the value of education beyond high school by talking to those individuals who will be at that point in their life when they have a perspective about what really mattered to them in their college experience, and was it worth the time and the money that they invested in that part of their life. The information that we're getting from being out in the field with Gallup to talk to the graduates of many of our institutions will inform the work that we do with what we've talked to you about multiple times, which is the creation of this Indiana College Value Index, which will be our attempt and the first attempt in the nation to bring together an index that measures both the quantitative and the qualitative metrics around the value of education beyond high school. We've been funded by USA funds to work with Gallup in putting together this information and then putting together the value index. It is our intention to have that index prepared and distributed in the fall of this year as a first of many attempts to walk down this path. The first time that you do anything like this, it's difficult, it's hard. There are reasons why you would say maybe you wouldn't do it because it's not a complete picture always, but we're committed to actually, in a very proactive way, talking about and affirming the value of higher education, but then also being honest about ways that we can create an even greater sense of value in higher education. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce via the conference call here today our guest from Gallup, Stephanie Markin. Stephanie is a methodologist for Gallup, and she's going to be joining with us today. I guess she's been watching since the beginning, and she's coming to us from DC, and she's going to share an overview of the results and facilitate a discussion with you about what this might mean to Indiana and to students. So with that, Stephanie, we are prepared to hear from you.
Awesome. And can you guys hear me well?
We can.
Okay, great. All right. Well, so excited to be with you today, even if it's virtually. I wish I could have been there in person to chat with you all about some of the results that we have from the 13 participating colleges and universities from Indiana. So I'm going to put up a PowerPoint deck so you won't be able to see my face, but after we're done, I'll take it back down. Feel free to ask me any questions you might have about any of the results that I share. So let's see. I'm better at research than technology, so hopefully this agrees with me. All right. Can you guys see that
It's
on your
loading.
screen as well?
Well, we hope.
Okay.
It's loading, but yes.
We hope. Okay. You let me know when it's good.
It's good.
All right, awesome. So I thought it'd be helpful to start just providing you a little bit of context about the study more generally, since I know some of you may be more familiar with it than others. So just a little bit of context about how we embarked upon this research more generally. So for years, when we've discussed the outcomes of a college degree, we've mostly focused on what we here at Gallup think of as traditional economic metrics. And in particular, researchers and policymakers really encourage, and I think the public is now demanding, that colleges and universities track things like alumni job placement rates, employment rates, student loan default rates, and starting salaries. And while, at Gallup and otherwise, I think we would all agree that these metrics are really important, I think we also know that they just start to paint a picture and they really don't tell the whole story. And so when we talk to graduates or we talk to prospective students, when we ask them things like, why do you want to obtain a degree, or why did you go through the process of getting an undergraduate education? We hear things like, I wanted a better life. I wanted a better future. I wanted a better job. And so in 2013, Gallup said, well, the ultimate outcome of a college degree is a better life, and somebody ought to be measuring the extent to which these degrees are actually translating to better lives for these graduates. And we thought we really need to do so with a more holistic approach than has traditionally been used. And so we launched the Gallup-Purdue Index, which is a nationally representative study of about 30,000 college graduates annually. We've done 2 administrations to date, each with bachelor's degree holders and higher. And we focused on measuring what we consider the essential elements of how these graduates are living their lives, including their workplace engagement for those who are employed for an employer, and the extent to which they were thriving in various elements of well-being, as measured by the Gallup Healthways Well-Being Index. We also wanted to understand which collegiate experiences were most highly correlated with those strong positive outcomes, so we could help individual universities understand how they could improve in the future. So just a few details about the study design to provide you some context in which you can interpret some of the data that I'll be sharing today. So the study was conducted from February of 2014 through June of 2015. As I said, we've had 2 administrations today, so we've interviewed about 60,000 bachelor's degree holders nationally, and that represents over 2,000 unique colleges and universities throughout the United States. The study is nationally representative. We achieved that by actually recruiting respondents with a bachelor's degree or higher who participated in the Gallup Daily Tracking Survey to a follow-up survey. So anybody who we talk to on a nightly basis who has a bachelor's degree or higher is then asked for their email address, and we forwarded them a web-based interview. We also weight the national data to important demographics of interest to make sure it's nationally representative. So this national effort has really spurred individual relationships with colleges and universities, but in the fall, we actually created a relationship with the commission specifically to look at colleges and universities within Indiana. So 13 colleges and universities participated throughout the state. We just really thank the commission for their help in identifying and recruiting those universities. I hope that you guys have had as much pleasure working with us as we have with you. We've really enjoyed working and getting to know each individual university throughout the partnership. So we interviewed using the Gallup-Purdue Index Core Survey, and then we added some custom items based on our partnership with the commission to dive a little bit more deeply into the individual collegiate experiences that the Core Survey covers and understand how we could really improve those outcomes for these graduates. We fielded the surveys over a several month period, so from November of 2015 to April of 2016. So we had several comparison groups included in the scorecard that I believe you all have in front of you this afternoon. So we really wanted to understand the extent to which graduates from participating universities in Indiana, these 13 schools that we were working with, how they compared to graduates nationally, that is bachelor's degree holders from the national study, and then specifically graduates from Indiana universities. So those are the 3 comparison groups that you'll see throughout the scorecard. So first, I think it's helpful to provide a little bit of context about the metrics that are included in the core survey. So the instrument was really designed to capture the extent to which college graduates were experiencing or achieving what Gallup calls great jobs and great lives. And so we used our Gallup Q12 instrument, which includes about 12 questions that help measure employee engagement among those who are employed by an employer. And each question is designed to assess a specific element of their work life. And then we use responses to those 12 questions to categorize respondents as engaged in their work, not engaged in their work, and actively disengaged in their work. And as you can imagine, somebody who's engaged in their work is emotionally connected to their mission or purpose of their work. Someone who's not engaged is kind of going through the motions. And somebody actively disengaged is kind of a toxic force in their workplace. You can imagine if you were walking down the hallway in your own workplace and you saw a piece of paper on the floor, the engaged employee would pick it up, put it back where it belonged, the not engaged person walks around it, and the actively disengaged person put it there. So and you can imagine these sprinklers within your own workplace. So we also utilized the Gallup Healthways Wellbeing 5 instrument to understand the extent to which graduates were thriving in what we call 5 interrelated elements of well-being. So that is their purpose well-being, which for those who are employed tends to be career well-being. For those who are not employed, it's just about finding mission or purpose in your day-to-day activities and really finding fulfillment in your day-to-day life. Then social well-being, which is really just about having supportive relationships in your life, people you could turn to in a time of need. Then financial well-being, which is really about managing your financial stress. Most people think it's related to income. There is some relationship between financial well-being and income, but after about $75,000 in annual income, we actually see no gains in your financial well-being. And that's because it's really about understanding the extent to which your money is coming in and out of your account and less so how much is actually in your account, if that makes sense. And then community well-being, which is just the extent to which you feel involved in or a part of your community or comfortable in your community. And then physical well-being, which is about having enough energy to do what you want to do on a daily basis. And so again, we ask 12 questions because that's the magic number. And we categorize respondents into 3 categories as a result of how they answer those 12 questions. So people are either thriving, struggling, or suffering in their well-being. So an example of financial well-being, someone who's thriving is both making ends meet, but also getting ahead a bit. So they tend to be investing in a 401k as an example. Someone who's struggling is meeting monthly expenses, but probably not planning for the future. And someone who's suffering in that element is probably not even getting by. They're probably falling behind in monthly payment schedules. So just to give you a little bit of background about what the sample looked like. So we invited respondents who were between the graduation years of about 1939 and 2015 to participate in the study. And in total, over 20,000 people actually participated in the survey. We had a mean age of about 48 years old, which is pretty consistent with bachelor's degree holders nationally. And we had slightly more female respondents than male. 53% of the sample was female and 46% of the sample was male. But 80% were not retired. Only 20% reported they were retired. And then the race distribution, about 94% of our respondents in the Indiana participating schools were white. We also saw that the plurality were married, so about 71% reported that they were married, and the plurality were making between $60,000 and about $240,000 on an annual basis when you looked at the household income level. All right, so first we look at the extent to which these graduates were engaged in their work. And you'll note that nationally about 40% of all U.S. college graduates are actually engaged in their work. And again, those are the emotionally invested employees that I discussed earlier, compared with about 44% of all Indiana college graduates. And when you compare that to the participating colleges and universities, we actually see 47% of those graduates were engaged in their work. Now, the 7% difference may seem negligible to some, but of note, this is actually one of the greatest differences we've seen when comparing specific colleges and universities back to the national average, which we've now done with about 50 individual colleges and universities to date. So it's actually a pretty significant difference between ICHE participating schools and the GPI national average of 40%. So in addition to the Q12 measurement that I discussed, we also asked respondents a series of questions to measure the extent to which they were fulfilled by their work. So on a 5-point scale where 1 represents strongly disagree and 5 represents strongly agree, we asked them to rate their level of agreement with the following items. I'm deeply interested in the work that I do. My job gives me the opportunity to do work that interests me, and I have the ideal job for me. And while graduates from participating universities exceeded the national average on actually all 3 of these metrics, they tied the Indiana average on feeling deeply interested in their work. So perhaps most importantly, though, they actually achieved exceptionally high marks on the extent to which they had an ideal job for them, which we thought was a really positive sign for the participating colleges and universities. So in addition to the questions about workplace fulfillment, ICHE also created several custom questions that were designed to address the relevancy of one's educational experience to their current work. So again, this was asked of those who were employed. So the hypothesis, of course, is that one's education should ideally be relevant to the current work that they do. Otherwise, presumably some of them might have major field of study regret. So while less than half actually reported their education was completely related to their work, another third reported it was somewhat related, and 22% said it was not at all related. And, I've heard several people review these data and interpret it several different ways. So on the one hand, some have reacted really negatively to the finding, noting that more than half don't feel like their education was completely related to their current work. But in contrast, I think several people, including myself, I would actually view these results pretty positively. I think those who view it as completely related likely majored in a field like teaching, where I studied teaching, I studied education, I became a teacher, and it's a very linear relationship. Whereas I think we see that people in a somewhat related category tend to be people who maybe had a liberal arts education, learned how to be critical thinkers, and then potentially got into a more specific niche field. So I wouldn't think of this as a damaging finding. I would say that the 22% that feel it's not at all related is slightly concerning, and I think they do require further follow-up to understand the extent to which maybe your coursework isn't related to what you do, but perhaps you learned important critical thinking skills or other skills entirely that set you on a different path. So I think that remains to be seen, and to me that's an outstanding question in this research that probably requires a deeper consideration. So next we look at well-being, and that is the extent to which our respondents were thriving each of the 5 elements I mentioned earlier. So of note, graduates who obtain their degree from a participating college or university were more likely to be thriving in a greater number of elements when you compared them to their peers nationally, and even their peers from Indiana University specifically. So 17% of the alumni from our participating universities were actually thriving in all 5 elements of well-being. And those are folks from Gallup's perspective that have really achieved kind of the pinnacle of well-being. That's actually very rare and exceptional nationally. So when we look, for example, at a U.S. adult average, we see that number is closer to 10 or 9%. So 17% is pretty exceptional from our perspective. When we look at the results by well-being element and dive more deeply into the specific elements, we identify a similar pattern. So you'll note that college graduates who obtain their degree from these participating universities were actually far more likely to be thriving in each element of well-being when compared to college graduates nationally and Indiana college graduates specifically. You'll note that the greatest difference between these graduates and graduates nationally was actually in the area of purpose well-being. And as a reminder, purpose well-being is the extent to which one finds meaning in their day-to-day activities. It tends to be highly related to things like employee engagement for those who are employed. So that was where we saw the greatest divergence. But for the most part, with the exception of physical well-being, the differences were all at about 8 percentage points, which, again, to underscore, is pretty unprecedented in terms of when we compare individual schools and universities back to this national average. So in addition to measuring one's well-being, we also measure the extent to which individuals are thriving in what we call their life evaluation. And in order to do so, we use the Cantrell self-inquiry scale, which asks respondents on a ladder, steps 0 to 10, where 0 represents the worst possible life and 10 represents the best possible life, where they place themselves today. And then we ask them to predict where they think they'll be in 5 years. Now, typically, as you can imagine, the mean life evaluation in current day is always less than what people anticipate for the future, which is consistent with what we saw here. But of note, we actually saw a higher mean life evaluation among all participating Indiana school graduates when we compare it to the GPI national average. So on average, it was about a 7.92 when they thought about their current life compared to a 7.4 for the national average. And when we asked them to think about their future life, it was at an 8.74 compared to 8.42. So while they seem like small differences, they're actually statistically significant. And since I like to remind people very often, statistical significance, of course, we found when things aren't meaningfully different. But in this case, this is actually a meaningful difference from our perspective based on the research that we've done. So the ultimate goal of this study when we started out was to really identify, okay, these are the important outcomes that we're measuring against, but how do we increase the likelihood people will experience these positive outcomes, and therefore what are the unique collegiate experiences that are actually highly associated with these positive outcomes, in particular employee engagement and well-being. And so through linear regression, we actually evaluated the relationship between very specific college experiences that we anticipated would improve outcomes and those positive outcomes that I've mentioned. So we use the linear regression to identify these relationships while holding all other outcomes or factors constant. And this analysis identified essentially 6 critical elements of the collegiate experience that we've identified as being highly important to one's employee engagement and well-being in the long term. So in the case of support, we asked respondents several questions about the support they received while in college. So again, on a 5-point scale where 1 represented strongly disagree and 5 represented strong agreement, we asked them the extent to which they agreed or disagreed that their professors cared about them as a person, that they had at least one professor who made them excited about learning, and then the extent to which they had a mentor who encouraged them to pursue their goals and dreams. And based on that analysis, we actually know that all of these items are equally important to predicting well-being and employee engagement. So that is, if you strongly agree with each of these items, you're far more likely to have strong outcomes long-term. So if you strongly agree that your professors cared about you as a person while in college, you're 2 times as likely to be thriving in your well-being and 2 times as likely to be engaged in your job much later in life, which is particularly of interest. So when we look at differences on these items, between what we've seen nationally and what we see with all participating Indiana colleges and universities, we see a few interesting things. So 44% of all participating Indiana schools reported that they had a professor who cared about them as a person. Compare that with the national average of 28%. It's actually one of the starkest differences we see when we compare individual universities with the national average. We actually haven't seen this with other colleges and universities we've worked with. So that was rather significant. We saw similar differences between having at least one professor who cared about you and made you excited about learning, or having a professor or a mentor who encouraged you to pursue your goals and dreams. But having professors who cared about you as a person was pretty stark and pretty significant difference. Now, of course, as a colleague of mine would like to say, if you show them love during their undergraduate years, they tend to show you love during their time after college. And so I would also note that people who strongly agree with these statements are actually huge donors for colleges and universities. They tend to be more likely also to volunteer with an alumni organization. So there is a strong relationship between some of these metrics and longer term outcomes in terms of your relationship with your alma mater. So in addition to these 3 supportive experiences, we saw equally significant relationships between experiential opportunities offered by these universities and the long-term outcomes of well-being and employee engagement. So again, if students strongly agree with each of these items, they're about twice as likely to be thriving in their well-being and to be engaged in their jobs later in life. So in the case of these items, the results were mixed from participating colleges and universities. So in the case of internships, our graduates from participating colleges were actually more likely to report they had an internship or job that allowed them to apply what they were learning in the classroom. They were also more likely to report they were extremely active in extracurricular activities when comparing them both to the national average and Indiana University average. But of note, there were small differences in the percent that reported that they worked on a project that took a semester or more to complete. In fact, all participating Indiana schools and universities were actually lower on this item when compared to the national average and the Indiana University average. However, in the case of a long-term project that took a semester or more to complete, I would note also that unlike the support items where agreement on these 3 supportive experiences is all equally important, right? So it doesn't matter which of those 3 you agree with, they have equal weight. In the case of experiential learning, we actually don't see that's the case. All of these have strong predictive power in terms of someone's well-being and employee engagement later in life. But the one that has the strongest power is actually having an internship where you apply what you were learning. So even though I would say the results on the second item are slightly more negative, I think the strong performance on the first actually can kind of offset the issues that we saw in the second item. So I just wanted to note that. So as I indicated, experiences in the collegiate experience significantly affect your relationship with your alma mater later in life. So to measure one's attachment to their university, Gallup actually included several items on the survey to measure their connection to the university. And these items are actually modified from some work that Gallup has conducted with other organizations and a lot of companies and corporations, where we see that those who strongly agree with these statements are actually far more likely to reinvest in their business, but also recommend the business to others. And similarly, in the case of higher ed, we've actually seen people who strongly agree with these statements are far more likely to recommend their college or university to a friend, a family member, or a colleague. So Gallup explores the connection between their alumni and their alma maters by looking at their level of agreement with 2 items. Blank college or university was a perfect school for people like me, and I can't imagine a world without X university. So graduates strongly agreed with both items are what we call emotionally attached to their alma mater. And on these items, we see that these graduates from participating colleges and universities actually outperformed on the case of the perfect school for people like me. In the case of I can't imagine a world without my university, they underperformed when compared to other Indiana universities, but they overperformed when compared to the national average. So it was generally positive on both of these items. So given the rising cost of higher education, increasing accountability nationally, much attention now is really being paid to how worthwhile the investment of a higher degree is. And, so Gallup has worked with participating Indiana colleges and universities to really identify custom questions that were designed to measure the value of a college degree. So these questions were a combination of items that we already had on the Gallup Purdue Index Core survey, so things like my education was worth the cost, and additional custom items that we developed with ICHE to delve a little bit more deeply into this issue. So of note, we see that about 81% of all graduates either agreed or strongly agreed their education was worth the cost among participating universities. Now, this percentage is obviously lower among those who borrowed loans to obtain that degree. So you'll note that it's closer to 76% for those with student loans. And I think that this is a really important finding to discuss in a little more detail. We've looked at this finding pretty extensively in our national database. So I think it's important to underscore that because people, I think, are very hesitant to either acknowledge or come to grips with the fact that costs of higher education are increasing rapidly. I spend a lot of time with leaders at universities that kind of have heart palpitations when I come to this slide because they know they're not the cheapest alternative or option available to their prospective students, and I think that they have great angst with thinking about how they can control costs further. And so I want to make sure that we note that even though the percentage strongly agreeing their education was worth the cost is slightly lower among those who borrowed to obtain their degree, and let's be honest, most people now have to borrow at least some amount of money to obtain that degree, it's not tremendously different by debt level. That is, if you borrowed between $5,000 and $10,000 as an example to obtain your degree, and you borrowed $0 to obtain your degree, you're really no more or less likely to report that your degree was worth the cost. The biggest difference comes with those who are most heavily indebted. So those who have borrowed or loaned at $50,000 or more to obtain their degree, that's where we see the biggest difference starts to exist with those who say their degree was worth the cost. So nationally, we've tried to figure out, okay, so a lot of people are having to borrow about $25,000 to $50,000 in order to obtain their degree. How can we identify those who continue to feel their degree was worthwhile, even given their high amounts of student loan debt? So we actually looked very deeply into those who are more heavily indebted nationally. And basically our biggest and I think most interesting finding was if you loaned or borrowed $50,000 or more to obtain your degree, but you had these 6 important experiences during your collegiate experience, you were actually just as likely as somebody who borrowed $0 to say your degree was worth the cost. So I just mentioned that in passing because I think it's really important to contextualize this finding that just because students are borrowing money doesn't mean they don't perceive value in their degree. It's just really incumbent upon the university at that point to create an atmosphere and for the student to really take advantage of that atmosphere to actually get great value out of their degree. So we also asked people in several custom questions the extent to which they felt that they had help or assistance in some sort from the university themselves to take advantage of some of the experiences that I've discussed so far. So as an example, we asked respondents who had an internship or job while attending college whether or not they had received help from the university in finding that internship or job. And of note, less than half of these graduates actually said yes. Now, from our work nationally, we know that the source of the internship is less important, but that the relevancy of that internship or job to what those students were doing in the classroom is actually very important. And we also know that if you found your job or your internship through a college or university, you were more likely to find one that was more relevant to what you were learning in the classroom. So we do know that there is some sort of, I would say, investment or need for universities to play a bigger role in that process. I think more damaging in terms of just of these findings was that only 15% reported that they received help in finding a job after graduation from their university. Now, of course, some people don't require help. They, have great social networks outside of the college or university, but we know a lot of people do require help, especially given this market. And so we thought that presented a really unique opportunity for, I would say, growth and development upon universities in terms of how they can position their career services offices more perfectly to actually provide the type of assistance the graduates are looking for. So obviously this entire endeavor has really been focused on how we can help individual universities in their pursuit to improve as an institution. And so in our national work, we've worked, as I mentioned, with about 50 colleges and universities to date, in addition to the ICHE Commission partners. And in that work, we've really had, I think, the unique pleasure of seeing how individual programs can play out at a university level to really improve the results that we've seen for the university. So we've done a few case studies today, and I just wanted to share a few examples of how universities are using these results, because I think it's really important to not only have research for research's sake, but actually to put some practical application of those results. And these examples, I've actually blinded the university names. I did that strategically, although you could probably figure out by doing a little bit of Googling who they are. But I think the name of the university and the type of the university is really secondary to what they're actually doing, because all of the examples that I'm sharing today could actually be implemented in a public, a private, a small, a large, for-profit, not-for-profit college or university. It really doesn't require a specific context. It really just requires an audit of what's currently happening at the university. So in the example of University 1, we actually are working with a university that's reshaping the content and focus of their orientation courses. So they have a University 101 course that all students take in their freshman year. And previously, they've spent a lot of time talking about things like how you get to the career services office, how you use the career services office, when it's open, when it's closed, navigating financial forms as an example. And so they've really reshaped their content to talk a lot more about these big six experiences that I mentioned earlier, both about how you can take advantage of them, but then how you have an obligation to actually go out and pursue them. So I spent a lot of time talking with colleges and universities, and by and large, I hear at least once in a meeting, well, we have all these available opportunities for students to explore, and they choose not to. And what are we supposed to do, right? And so I think this university in particular is spending a lot of time teaching students that it's really the pressure is upon them to take advantage of the opportunities already available, that the university's already created this environment and they need to really fully use it. In the case of University 2, we're actually working with the university that's launching a new alumni mentoring program. So when they got their results back, their mentorship items were actually very low. And so they're launching a full mentorship program where they're actually using alumni. They said very honestly, we can't ask faculty and staff to do anything above and beyond what they're already doing. And we're very aware of that. And so anything that's happening organically is wonderful, but we really need something designed intentionally. And therefore, we're actually going to call upon our alumni in order for them to serve as mentors to our current undergraduate students. So they're launching a pretty large capital campaign in that regard. And then University 3 is actually flipping the distribution of their admissions and marketing staffs with their career and advising staff. So in the case of this university, they found that they're doing an amazing job in the admissions area. So they have about 14 dedicated staff just in the admissions department that are spending a lot of time thinking about how they can get the right students in the door. Whereas on the career and advising staff side, they saw really damaging results in terms of the percent of their university graduates who said they had received help from career services, who actually provided very strong open-ended feedback that the help they received was insufficient or non-existent. And so they're actually increasing the percentage of full-time staff they have in the career advising area by about 200% in order to see potential improvements in that area. And then in the case of University 4, we're actually working with a large public university that's going to be our first well-being university. So they're actually going to be measuring well-being among their current students, staff, faculty, and their alumni in order to see how they can improve it over time with specific intentional programs. So I just mentioned those four. We obviously are working with a lot of different universities right now, so tons more to speak to if you're interested in those results. But I wanted to mention them in passing because I know this group is really interested in how individual universities can kind of put into practice some of these findings, and I think these are good examples of that. So with that, I would just say, definitely let me know if you have questions and a follow-up, but I'd also love to hear from you all if you have any questions right now that I could answer.
Thank you so much. One question comes to mind, and then I'll turn it over to the commission members. But as you know, Stephanie, from looking at our list of participating schools, we did have our community college, Ivy Tech, participate in this as well. And you made reference to only in terms of four-year degrees and beyond. It was my understanding from talking to Brandon and others that even your early Gallup Purdue index had some intent to look at two-year students, two-year colleges as well. And I'm wondering, if not, how would you interpret this data for the the students who graduated from two-year schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I should have also mentioned we've done some additional research with USA funds, actually looking just at outcomes for two-year degree holders. So in addition to this study, we actually did a separate study entirely with USA funds, and those results are actually publicly available, and I'd be happy to share them with you. But essentially, we looked at these same metrics, these same survey items among two-year degree holders. And we also wanted to compare them to the four-year degree holders. So I know a lot of time is spent talking about community college outcomes and the extent to which community college outcomes are a better investment potentially for some versus a four-year degree. We've actually seen that our community college degree holders perform really well on a lot of the metrics I talked to today. So they do perform slightly worse in terms of their well-being or employee engagement by about 2 to 3 percentage points, but it's so negligible. I know I mentioned this in passing, statistical significance versus meaningful significance. The differences were statistically significant, but I don't think they were meaningfully significant. That is, I think a lot of the community college outcomes were as strong as the bachelor's degree outcomes, which I think is actually really encouraging for two-year degree grantors and for those pursuing a two-year degree. So I would say that, I'd be happy to share the fuller report with you, but we have started to study those outcomes. We've also started to study postgraduate degree holders. So we did a separate follow-up study in partnership with another university where we just looked at our postgrad folks. We do see they tend to be more highly engaged in their jobs and tend to be more likely to thrive in their well-being, much greater gains when you compare them to bachelor's degree holders. So if you look at the 3 degree types, it tends to be community college holders or two-year degree holders and bachelor's degree holders are about within 1 to 2 percentage points of each other. And then the postgraduate degree holders go up by about 5 or 6 percentage points. So greater gap between a 4-year and a postgraduate degree. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, it does. I'll turn it to others for questions. Chris?
Yeah, a couple of questions. First, can you cut this data, or is there a difference in this data or the results by 5-year increments being out of school? You got it from 1939 to 2015. That's the first question. Are there differences among genders, and are there differences among ethnicity? Is our sample in Indiana large enough to even cut those? And then it looks at the same items on the next page, which would be married, single, divorced, widowed, domestic partner, and income levels.
Yeah, so let me see if I can answer all points because you have a lot of good questions in there. So I would say the good news is we had enough sample to cut by all of those demographic groups in the case of Indiana specifically, but we've also looked at those groups nationally in our 60,000 plus database. We've also looked at those items nationally for all U.S. adults versus just, degree holders. So in the case of well-being and employee engagement, and age, we actually do see a positive relationship. That is, the older you are, the more likely you are to be thriving in your well-being, the more likely you are to be engaged in your job. That was why when we compared you guys back to the national average, we picked a group that was equal in mean age to make sure that the comparison could hold and made sense, because we know that it is highly tied to age. Interestingly enough, undergraduate experiences are also highly related to age. So if you graduated between 2000 and 2015, you're actually far more likely to report you had those strong 6 experiences while you were in college. Now, I think that's for 2 reasons. One, I think recall is just much stronger for those folks. I think they can more easily recall those events. I also think...
Whoops! Did I do that?
You did that. You were removed.
You were removed from the
I was
meeting.
removed.
She's gonna think you hung
Thank you, God.
Well, while we're waiting to get back on line with her, are there some other sort of questions or comments you'd like to make about the results that were shared? Chris?
I was just curious about the sample size. It's 13 universities that signed up for it. Why only 13? Is this going to be something that continues on?
It will.
Adding-
We certainly made, we had a cutoff point at which we couldn't accept any more, but it was open to anyone, and the benefits in terms of the cost benefits of joining would have been open to anyone. Some institutions felt like they were not prepared at that point to make the decision. They had efforts underway. We've encouraged them to use these results to maybe have them rethink, and then, we're committed to doing this again. So we're hoping that we will not only retain all 13 public and private institutions that are there, but that we'll gain some others going forward who see that, our intent to use this information is to really drive improvement And I know that's, when Gallup was looking at this, that's really what its intention is as well. And, I hope that people will see actually there's really good news here. And there's obviously data that you can use to drive changes to have it be in keeping with what I said earlier, to make it even more valuable.
Right.
So yes, we hope more will join the next time, but we thought having 13 institutions the first time out, not knowing what they were really committing to exactly, really, I think it spoke to the credibility of having a partner like Gallup. For one, they knew it was going to be done in a statistically sound, way. And then we tried to make it clear, that this data would be their data to use as they wanted to use it too. So yes, we'll have more people who do it, I think.
And do we have, or do the universities get a breakout
Yes.
for just them?
Yes, they
in
do.
comparison? Do we also have access?
We will see it too, but they will each give their own, yes. And that's all coming, so. Jerry and then John.
From a sample, so I just thought a little awkward to leave out the biggest campus. You've got 140,000 students that are not counted in this because Indiana.
Well, we hope that they will choose to join.
Isn't Purdue a part of this?
Purdue actually is a part of it because they were actually the trailblazers for this. So they led the way. Now they're getting data in a different way, but they're sharing their data with us as well. But
they're not in these.
They actually were already surveying their graduates before. So it's a matter of putting their data together with ours. So we make a point in a release that would go out that we talk about this was the Gallup Purdue Index, that they were really the inspiration for this and continue to provide information, even though some of the information that we put in this with specific questions, new questions that we drilled down, may not be a part of theirs now. So we need to continue to work because we want to provide as much comparability with this as well in terms of how we're able to, look at this information going forward. But you're correct. I mean, yes, there are significant numbers of schools and consequently alums that aren't included, and it would be our hope that this first-time effort, which we think is really, a very meaningful data that's being provided, will encourage others to engage with us going forward.
Can the institutions push a button and get the responses for their school?
The ones that are participating now, yes, they'll be able to get all the information for their schools.
Well, I just wasn't clear. On these three categories, there's the national average, that's 2,000 colleges. Then it says Indiana universities. Are those the 13?
The 13, yes.
And then what are the all participating Indiana schools?
What page are you on?
Oh, well, I know quite a few. This happens to be 7, but I mean, on most of the charts.
I can actually clarify that. The first column is all participating Indiana schools. The middle was from the Gallup Purdue Index, and the third one, which is a little confusingly labeled, we try to get them to change that, are the Indiana colleges that were part of the Gallup Purdue Index. Is that correct? Okay, yes.
But so again, what's the first column?
That's the
13 Indiana
13.
schools that participated in the commission-specific survey.
Okay, but then the third column.
That's the subset of schools from Indiana that were part of the original Gallup Purdue Index.
In the GPI national.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It confused us too.
Yeah, we need to find a little more clarification.
What were the original schools again then? From Indiana?
Oh, they're listed.
They're on.
Oh, the original.
No, the ones
Original
that,
that are-
From the Gallup.
No, from the
I'm
Gallup.
still confused. I said this morning I'm slow, so
Yeah.
validating that every moment here.
Right with you.
Well, Purdue apparently had a survey some time ago, right?
Yeah.
well, Purdue has, and then they actually went in with a part of the, if I can, and they can explain better, but as a part of the Gallup Purdue Index, the initial one, they went in and of the 30,000 students that were surveyed, there were some Indiana students in that first survey.
They were all schools.
So they would be in that. So that's
third column.
the third column. So in addition to Purdue, you'd have whatever part was of the sampling that was done.
Yeah, they didn't give us for that third column. They didn't give us disaggregated data by school for that. It was more just, I think, context as sort of a fact check on to see to what degree our data, how it correlated with the data they'd had up until that point. And just so you know, the issue with the connections actually on their end, they're going back and forth with their tech person trying to reconnect, but may want to move on.
Yeah, I think at this point, this part of the discussion
Yeah.
is, we can always get questions to her is equally important and other information you might want to have.
Very good.
If I could ask real quick, will we get a copy of the presentation so we can review?
We have a copy here,
We
but
got
we
a lot
will
of
get
stuff.
one to you
I
as
finally
well.
figured it out.
I think we just received it, so.
Just through, I would look at it.
Can I,
Yes.
can I ask one more question? Or do we need to move on?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
we have, and John wanted one too then.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I think this is really fun data, and I think it's really interesting. And I understand kind of how individual institutions can use it. How are we going to use it as the commission? What are our applications for this?
Well, we are in the process of figuring exactly how we put this together, but what we're going to do is, this will be a combination of our ROI, which is the way we measure the quantitative value, and then we're trying to marry that with qualitative metrics about the value to produce an index that provides a comprehensive look at value, both from a quantitative and qualitative. What actually mattered to you? And so we know debt matters. We know whether you graduated on time matters. We know how much money you make. A lot of the things that we put in our ROI and in our completion reports matter. But we know that there are these other things that we talked about today too that are much more difficult. But we know they matter to people when they actually say, did their college experience match what they wanted? And
You're gonna use it for marketing. You're gonna market college.
well,
right?
what we're really trying to do is answer the question, is college, what is the value of college and how do we make it more valuable? That's what we're really trying to do with the index.
Thank you. We have time for one more. John?
I had a sampling question as well. I'm a little bit troubled by a mean age of 47. We're comparing people who graduated from college 25, 40 years ago with people who graduated from college 5 or 10 years ago. I don't know what the value of information about college experience from somebody that graduated in 1950 really gives us today. So I would hope that we could break this out in a few age categories, and I think the data would be more valuable if we did that.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think actually looking at both more recent graduates, having said that, the relationship between faculty, the idea of having some sort of applied knowledge, there are a lot of these metrics that not surprisingly to you, you would find would matter to someone as much our age as they would matter to someone who'd been 25. So I think there are some that's sort of, timeless kind of data that the age isn't as much. And then there are some that we also, the other thing that you have to measure is all the practices that have kicked in terms of internships and other things in recent years that you could not measure.
Exactly.
So I'm not so sure it's what the metrics are in terms of whether they're measuring the right things. It's more a matter of how do we measure more current things that have changed about the delivery that address those things. And I think this is one of the ways when, we say going forward, it's one of the ways you continue to improve. Just like we keep improving our readiness reports and our completion reports and our ROI reports, what we will use from this is, as a baseline, how do we make this better?
Right. I mean, when I first looked at, how many people's college helped to get a job, that number is very low, and I thought, oh, that's horrible. But then we didn't do that really so much 20 or 30 years ago. We're doing a lot better now.
I think that's an excellent point.
All right, thank you all very much. We will now move to the topic of college completion. Indiana's college completion reports are produced annually to provide a clearer and more comprehensive picture of college completion in order to advance Indiana's our collective efforts to boost education attainment. And Dr. Townsley is going to give us a preview of the 2016 report. Stacy has been doing a wonderful job of updating us and keeping us abreast. So we look forward to getting insight for what's coming forward with the 2016 report.
And I will do that as soon as I am able to. I'm really pleased to share with you some of our initial findings with our degree completion data. But I wanted to give a shout out to my two wonderful data analysts that are part of my team, Gina Diem and Jordan Allen, and I hope that you will have a chance to meet them at our August meeting. They tend to be like me, we kind of prefer to be in our cubicles, right? But I will be sure to drag them along because they've done so much of the work that you've been seeing with all of our changes in our reports. Okay. Okay. So as highlighted in our commission's strategic plan, we are committed to providing a more comprehensive look at Indiana's educational attainment rates, as well as the actual achievement gaps, and also look at the progress we're making on these attainment rates and closing these achievement gaps. And so the Commission's annual college completion reports is a tool that allows us to do that. Why am I always having problems here? All right, very good. Allows us to track the progress towards state completion goals, focus our attention on those achievement gaps, and show a bigger picture of student success. And so my presentation today will loosely follow these three pieces. But first, a note about the data. Our data come from the enrollment and completion data from our Indiana public institutions and the National Student Clearinghouse. The cohorts that we use are those who entered an institution as a first-time, full-time degree-seeking student upon entry at Indiana Public. We focus on the 2015 graduates, so our on-time completion rates, we're looking at those who finished at the same campus with the same degree level. At the four-year institutions, those who started in fall 2011. At the two-year institutions, those who started in fall 2013. We also look at extended six-year completion rates, again, of those who finish at any campus at any degree level. And that particular cohort is those who started in fall 2009.
So, Stacey, I want to make sure we understand this, that they don't think we're only following first-time we're following transfer students, we're following students that takes longer to complete in those completion reports as well. So this information is much more granular than you would get in iPads alone, where we just only follow first-time, full-time students and what happens. And I'm not sure you might want to explain that, make sure we understand the difference.
Okay, so your traditional graduation rate typically follows your first-time, full-time student at the same campus within 2 years or 4 years. And with this report, we're expanding that just a little bit so that we're able to look at those who end up going to a different institution or end up earning a degree at a higher or lower level than they initially pursued. For this third annual report, again, in the spirit of continuous improvement, we continue to refine our measures and provide greater context. And to that end, we've introduced a new achievement gap measure. We're also looking at more enrollment and completion by campus type. We know, for example, that two-year institutions have the greatest percentage of students who are older, who attend part-time, who are lower income. And the regional and comprehensive or metropolitan institutions, in turn, have a greater percentage of those student populations than your traditional main campuses. These differences in student populations contribute to fairly significant differing variations in completion trends. Also new in this year's report is a more granular analysis of completion rates. We're looking at meta-major completion. We're also going to be introducing interactive dashboards like we did with our other reports. And we do plan on doing a supplemental study that looks at degree and transfer pathways so that we really can see what students are doing at a more granular level. So again, given the differences in student populations, it's perhaps not surprising that we see trend variations across campus types. So when we look at on-time completion, we see that main campus institutions are much closer to the state's on-time graduation rate goal of 50%. Yet we see improvement across all campus types. So for example, over the last 5 years, main campuses, they've improved by nearly 10 percentage points to currently standing at 48.9% on-time completion. At non-main campuses, they've doubled their rates, improving by 8 percentage points to 16.3%. And at 2 years, they've increased by 3 percentage points, with most of the increase occurring within the last year. And indeed, we see improvement at every institution. This chart shows the level of improvement over 5 years, with Ball State, Purdue West Lafayette, and Purdue Calumet seeing the most gains in their on-time graduation rates. For example, at Ball State, they went from 32.5% to 47.4% with that equals a 15 percentage point difference. At Purdue West Lafayette, they went from 39% to 52%. It's a 13.1% difference. And at PU Calumet, they went from 7.1% to 19.3% on-time graduation rate. Also, I wanted to note that that slide that I just showed is actually different than the handout that you have. There was a minor correction that we needed to make. Yes, please. So in the handout, Vincent's improvement was lower than what it should have been. Thank you.
Are we making comparisons over a long period of time? Just thinking that 50 years ago, the on-time graduation rate might have been higher than this because there are fewer people that were selective, I think, at some point. I'm just wondering what the changing demographics of higher education might do to the on-time percentages.
So you're referring to rates prior to 5 years ago. Is that what you're asking?
There are cultural changes in higher education. I'm not sure I have arguments one way or the other. I do think that just from recollection, from the time I was in college, I don't remember that people not finishing or on time. I mean, if some people dropped out, maybe they would not be counted in their class year to graduate sometime later. I come back and go to another institution.
And I think you have a point there, and I think that also underscores the importance of looking at completion across a longer time horizon as we witness those cultural changes and different demographic shifts. But no, I don't have offhand, I don't have that data to share. But I'll look into that.
I'm not even sure how much we have on-time completion data statewide back to what you're saying. I mean, I think you're right. I think there, in addition, you've seen these huge fluctuations in enrollments, mostly up and now down a little bit, which actually, we're trying to move the on-time graduation rate at the same time that we were moving the enrollments up considerably too, although those have gone down a little bit now. So I think all those things have to be considered. What we have to go back and figure out is when do we really start collecting the data that we can use for some of this, because we started collecting a lot of the on time when we started putting it in the performance funding formula on a statewide level.
That's a good point.
I can't help sometimes when I look at a slide like this to feel kind of a yin and a yang. One hand, I look at this and say, this is really terrific progress made by our partner institutions. The other side is just an uneasy concern that the pressure on our universities to move and advance in this particular area, which unquestionably is important, can mitigate against quality. In other words, how are they doing this? Is it are kids moving through that maybe shouldn't move through to the next class? I worry about this one in particular in regard to the potential yang on the backside, saying, is there an unintended consequence to improvement in this area in another area that's also critically important? I don't know how we get at that, but it crosses my mind whenever I see this.
Well, that, I think, well said, and clearly at the center of why quality was a part of the 2012 plan and why competency as measured by what do students know and are able to do is a part of our new strategic plan, and how we have the correct measures of that remains critically important. It's I think, not a foregone conclusion that if you improve completion or on-time completion, you've diminished academic rigor, but you need to make sure you haven't.
Important points. So we see improvement rates across all institutions, and we also see the same pattern happening at most Ivy Tech regional campuses, and I wanted to share this slide with you because I know there's interest in the regional campuses as well. Just as a side note, the outliers at the bottom, Ivy Tech Richmond, for example, tend to have smaller cohort sizes, smaller cohorts of students who are attending first-time, full-time. And so we see greater fluctuation in the percentages. So
Stacy, can I make a quick comment before you leave that?
Sure.
The last two slides, and then comment on Chris's comment. First on his, that's why I have the same type of thought I think we all do when we look at this stuff. That's why you have to look, we look at them individually. This one's on completion in a sense, and we've got equal understanding and diving into the quality aspects and all of those things. We don't have the time necessarily, but it's nice to kind of put them all together in a package and understand, how you're doing all that. So, and then just a very nitpicky comment, maybe for future reference. To me, it's always hard to look at percentage increases and changes without looking at the absolutes of where they started, where they finished. So I don't know if if we can add that to the slide or.
Certainly.
Just for reference.
We were still developing the handouts as we spoke, but yes, thank you. I
No
will
urgency,
remember to
just
do that.
maybe for future reference.
Well, and I think Stacy and I have had this conversation. I know she'll talk about this later, but you need to measure progress, which is what the last two slides have, and then absolute where you are. And you have to do both of those things, and you have to acknowledge the importance of both, and our graphs should show that.
Right. So, which students are graduating on time? Our analysis points to two behaviors related to intentionality: staying within a general area or path of study, and staying enrolled full-time. This slide shows that of those who graduate on time, the vast majority stay within their general area of study, what we refer to as the meta major. So for example, STEM, business, arts and humanities. Now, students can still change their specific program of study and graduate on time, but the extent of their program change can slow them down. For example, if they went from STEM to business or vice versa. So, as the graph shows, the vast majority of those who graduated on time ended up staying within their entry meta major. And in fact, at two-year institutions, those who stay within the same entry meta major are 6 times more likely to graduate on time. And at four-year institutions, it's nearly twice as likely, 1.5 likelihood.
Could I make a side comment here? I want to make sure that we understand kind of what this means. And this is a case in where I'm afraid micro might not add up to macro. We want every student to graduate more quickly, but we don't necessarily want students to graduate so quickly that they lose that experience of finding out what it is that they want to do, and they end up with a mismatch between their actual goals and their major. So we kind of have to look at this data, I think, in a couple of different ways, and our objective can't be to get everybody through as rapidly as possible, but part of our objective needs to be to make a good match between the student and the major and their career.
Exactly, that's a very important point, and I think we can see, even those students can succeed. It's just to the extent they've been able to plan and work with their advisor and ensure.
Better to stay a fifth year than go out and find out that after 3 or 4 years you don't like what you're doing and go back and get another degree.
Right.
I'm not sure that's the case.
How often is that the case?
No, I'm not sure that, I don't know that's better. I mean, that you stay the 5th year to get the degree, to really find out. Because many people, and since I hire a lot of people, I want to tell you, doesn't matter what degree they have, they often find out this is not what they want to do. And and some go on to do something else with the degrees they have and don't need another degree, and some decide they want to go somewhere else and get that degree. And that's okay that they've had a college education, they've got the degree, they're out in the world, and they find that their passions are not what they thought they were going to be. But that's a whole lot better than maybe not getting out. And that's what I worry
Sure,
about.
it's a lot better than not getting out, but on the same token, although Dr. Bradley said all of our education students are in the classroom all 4 years of their career here, but clearly the experience they get in the classroom the first few years is not as intense, and they don't get as a realistic view of the classroom in those first 2 years as they do in their second 2 years. So you get an education student that gets to the middle of their third year and spends significantly more time in the classroom and decides that that's not really what they want to do. Getting them that knowledge and moving them earlier in their career is better than later in their career, and I think in their college career is better than after they've been in the classroom for a couple of years. So it's just not, all I'm saying is it's not a unidimensional objective. Sure. And we need not look at it in a unidimensional way, in my opinion.
Okay, so moving on again, in speaking with about those who are graduating on time, another aspect of intentionality is the extent to which students stay enrolled full-time. The bar chart represents the percentage of students who graduate on time by their enrollment intensity, whether they enrolled full-time, stayed enrolled exclusively full-time, which on all campuses was a majority, over 80%, or instead started full-time and ended up switching back and forth between full-time and part-time, which we call mixed. And our data clearly show that those who are enrolled exclusively full-time every semester are much more likely to graduate on time, 2 to 4 times as likely. So I wanted to point out that in order to be classified as full-time for this report, students had to be enrolled in at least 12 credit hours a semester. We did not examine the specific credit-taking behavior of students, but we know that in order to complete 120 120 credits for a bachelor's degree in 4 years, you have to take roughly on average 30 credits per year. So therefore, in order to graduate on time, those who had enrolled in a mixed enrollment status probably ended up taking summer classes or took heavier loads on the semesters that their schedule permitted, or they brought with them some significant pre-college credit, or they were concurrently enrolled elsewhere and transferred that credit in. So the Commission's on-time 15 to finish campaign and the related financial aid credit completion requirements starting in fall 2013, along with campus-based initiatives and the on-time performance funding metric, have all likely contributed to the uptick in on-time graduation rates. Because some of these policy initiatives are very recent, it's informative to look at what's happening on 2-year campuses. So for those with the 2012 and 2013 cohorts. As this graph shows, we see an improvement for all students, including all financial aid groups and the 21st Century Scholars with credit requirements. And I also wanted to note that at Ivy Tech specifically, we saw a significant improvement in on-time graduation rates for the 21st Century Scholars between 2012 and 2013. Those 21st Century Scholar cohorts improved 5 percentage points from around 3 to 8%, equal to the all other students category. And I also should note that we see similar improvements across all race and ethnicity groups as well, both at 2-year institutions and at 4-year institutions, and on average a 2 to 3% uptick. So while it's encouraging to see improvement in the on-time graduation rates, given the sensitivity of percentages to population sizes, for example, 8 out of 10 is 80%, 8 out of 100 is 8%, we should not rely solely on changes in these completion rates as a measure of improvement, particularly when we focus on closing the achievement gap for low-income and minority populations, which often are underrepresented on the campuses. So I wanted to share before I jump into our new measure. For example, we were looking at a main campus scenario where we saw for both Black and white students, their completion rates were trending upwards, but the difference between those rates was actually growing. And so one could conclude that the achievement gap was growing. But when we looked at it from a ratio statistic, when we looked at them relative to each other, we saw that the achievement gap was actually narrowing. So we felt that we needed to redefine how it is that we're talking about achievement gap. And so again, we're using a ratio statistic rather than just examining differences in completion rates. The achievement gap measure is a way of comparing degree completion rates that helps us more accurately identify where we are in terms of the actual achievement gap and to track progress over time. Simply put, the achievement gap measure is on a scale of 0 to 1, where 1 means the completion rates of your comparison groups are the same and the achievement gap is closed. The achievement gap measure is simply a way to identify the current state and progress towards your goal of closing the achievement gap. Now this slide gives a little bit more detail on our methodology. Again, trying to keep it simple, but what we're using is we're just basically comparing the completion rate of your underrepresented population divided by the completion rate of a majority population, or whichever two populations that you're comparing. And an interpretation of the result would be your underrepresented population is X times as likely to graduate on time compared to your majority population. And again, the gap is closed when this measure equals 1. So why use? And I think I've already touched on this, but again, this achievement gap measure gives you generally more accurate results than just using the differences in percentages. And it allows us to compare across campus types and institutions that often vastly differ in scale. So again, remember the goal is to have an achievement gap measure of 1, which means your comparison groups are performing equally relative to each other. And this goal of 1 is represented by the line at the top of this chart, which says gap closed. What this graph indicates is that across all campus types, low-income grant recipients, your 21st Century, your Frank O'Bannon, your Pell recipient, are about half as likely to graduate on time compared to their non-financial aid grant recipients. The achievement gap measures for each campus type, and they're listed here, are just over the halfway point, the top line. Did I keep everybody?
Sure.
Okay.
Could I ask a question about
Yes.
that? Can you get beyond 1? So you get to a 1.1, which means that the low income is
You sure
faster
can,
than the
yes.
regular population.
And then you have the reverse.
Right.
Mhm. So again, we can use this achievement gap measure to track progress towards our goal to closing the achievement gap by 2025. And this chart shows by campus type the average annual improvement needed to achieve the goal, where we are actually at in terms of average annual improvement. And then it also highlights the number of campuses making adequate progress according to this measure.
Now I don't understand your .02 and .01. You're saying the average annual improvement needed is .02. That's a .02 or 2%.
Right, in likelihood. So in this ratio statistic, we need to be seeing at least 0.02 improvement every year in order to achieve the goal by 2025.
I don't think it would. I mean, if 10 times 2 is 20. I mean, it'd be 20. So you go 62 to 82, right? You've got main campus .02.
Let me rephrase. So this particular graph is also showing by weighted statistics. So there may be, for each individual institution, there.
Now you are getting complex.
Yeah. Let me just keep it simple, but simplicity. So, I mean, it again is just a way to snapshot where we actually are and where we need to be, and now we can actually track it.
We have a ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So again, and this is another chart that looks at our minority student achievement gap. And when we talk about minority students, we're combining Black and Hispanic populations and comparing them to their peers, their white peers. And what this graph indicates is that across all campus types, minority students on main campuses are about half as likely to graduate on time compared to white students, while on non-main campuses and two-year institutions, they are less than half as likely. About 42%, 33% is likely.
So if I can just, once again, when you want a 0.02 improvement, is that a 56 to a 58?
Yes, in theory.
Stacy, I'm assuming this is similar to most of our stats in that this is just Indiana students?
I don't think, no, this was everybody.
This is all students.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let me go on to this. This slide is actually also another one similar to the previous chart. It's our progress towards closing the gap by 2025. And again, here we see that campuses right now are not on pace to meet the goal. Some of them are, but not all of them.
I hate to quote President Bradley, but I guess I will anyway. One of the things he talked about at lunch was the difficulty of median income students graduating on time, if you will. If we've defined the problem as one of income, by looking at different income classes, then really probably the only way to close that gap is to make income a non-factor in all kinds of things in universities. I don't know how we do that.
And that's the challenge. And that's why we're doing this, right? Are our goals aspirational? Are they attainable?
Well, I think it's important for us to note that in spite of the difficulty of doing that, we do have places in the country where where you compare students of poverty with students of poverty, they have no achievement gap. Now, they are the exception, not the rule, but there are places like that, and I have them reminded all the time when I travel around the country where they hold up a system where they actually have high degrees of poverty and completion rates that are almost comparable, or sometimes at a few places actually exceed. So that's not to discount the complexities that poverty bring to the equation, but many of us who have worked in the K-12 sector for a long time, while we certainly acknowledge that as well, we also said at the end of the day, what kinds of policies, programs, and changes can we make that address students who come from families of poverty? And so you'll hear things like preschool, or what do you actually do to address that? And I think that's the kind of discussion that these kinds of charts should, I think, direct us toward in the higher education sector as well.
I think to follow John's thought, John, and see if I understand it, or if there's a different way of looking at it, based on what we saw in the other room, in those graphs, one could argue that if in fact financial reasoning or financial wherewithal is a reason for not finishing on time, especially for those who are in the middle class, then it would be easier for those in poverty to get closer to the average than otherwise might be the case, because theirs is all funded. We've taken away the issue of funding for them. We've not taken away the issue of funding for those in the middle.
Right.
So the two groups that would most likely mirror each other from a funding standpoint would be the rich and the poor. The poor are paid for, the rich are paid for, the ones in the middle are left out.
Right. We also need to keep in mind that anything that we do for everybody moves the denominator as well as the numerator and doesn't change the ratio.
Exactly.
All right, Stacy, if you can continue.
Okay, moving on. So in addition to tracking progress towards on-time graduation goals, again, the completion reports look at a bigger picture of student success by including longer time horizons and including those who complete a different degree level or transfer and complete. So in doing that, as this graph shows, our extended 6-year completion rates for students entering in fall of 2009, or fall through 2005 through fall of 2009, also are improving, but more gradually than on-time rates. Our main campus extended completion rates improved by 4 percentage points, going from 71.6 to 75.7. Our non-main campus improved by approximately 5 percentage points, going from 39.3 to 44.5. And our 2 years by around 3 percentage points, from 26 to 29. And I'll point out that the national 6-year average rate is about 61% for 4-year publics, and then about 38% for 2-year publics.
For the same time period?
Yes.
Because this is right in the middle of this was a pretty significant economic.
And I will get to that.
Good.
You're good.
Also in the middle of this, most universities change their graduation requirements from 124 hours to 120.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of this trend is just that it takes 4 fewer credit hours to graduate than it used to?
Right. This is a complex issue, and as Teresa likes to point out, we like to, as much as possible, we have to reduce complexity to talk about it. But we do know that the intentional behaviors that drive on-time graduation are not necessarily holding true for those who are pursuing or completing in an extended time frame. So we know that a greater number of students switch between full-time and part-time. So this graph highlights those who complete within 6 years by their enrollment intensity, and clearly those who are switching or mixed represent a greater percentage than those that are on time. We also know that at 2-year institutions, for example, an increasing percentage of students are completing a lower credential than they initially pursued. And I want to highlight, so we start seeing that level of going to a lower degree, which is represented by the orange at the top of the chart. That percentage starts increasing about the time we have an economic recession, 2008, 2009, and it also, if you keep in mind, we started having a large influx of adult students into your institutions where, maybe earning a certificate was enough to get them a foothold back into the economy. We see the percentage holding fairly steady at 4 years, just switching to a lower degree, it's holding at about 5 to 6%. And then lastly, when we take a snapshot of completion and enrollment status as of 6 years, or at the end of a 6-year time horizon, we see that apart from those who've graduated, which are represented in the green and orange, there's still a fairly significant percentage of students who are still enrolled, which is represented by the blue. Between 5 to 13% of students who started in fall of 2009 were still enrolled. And about roughly half of those, if we look back at previous cohorts, about roughly half of those who were enrolled at 6 years end up completing a degree within 8 years. So again, with our completion reports, we're going to have all sorts of data for you to look at, and this will be on the dashboard. So we'll be breaking it out by different time horizons and by full-time, part-time. We're also developing this supplemental study that will take a closer look at the degree.
Turn it off.
All right.
That's
And transfer.
Susan.
We just lost Susanna.
Susan just got up.
So in summary, I'm just going to highlight again the 4 points. On-time graduation rates are improving across all institutions and all student populations examined. Intentionality is key. Staying within your general program of study and staying full-time are good indicators of being able to complete on time. Despite improvements, disparities remain for our low-income grant recipients and minority students, but our new measure allows us to better track progress and identify those achievement gaps. And the bigger picture of student success over 6 years, the completion rates are gradually increasing, and they also allow us to incorporate more of the switchers, those who would change enrollment, major, degree level. Any questions?
I guess I'd ask the question is the intentionality impacted by the pathways? Will it be impacted by the pathways?
Should be, yes.
It should be.
Should be, yes, absolutely. All the guided pathways work with it we're doing, yes.
Right. Because it seems
To
me
the
that's-
degree that you provide more information about people. You know, the 30 credit hour gen ed core helps, the single articulation pathways help in the second year, you know, providing all the career exploration work that we're trying to do with even high school diplomas in college, which doesn't change the fact that people will change their minds.
Sure.
But to the degree that we can minimize the loss of time and credits by having them in it, even if people change their mind, they often don't go from deciding they want to be in sciences, deciding they want to be in music. They do sometimes, but that's the exception, not the rule. And so I think, you know, you have to consider all those things, but the guided pathways to success are attempt to try to do the graduation maps, you know, the degree maps help, the graduation plans in high school, all those things help, understanding that, and I would not quibble with what John said, is that there are still people who are going to change. But to the degree that we can minimize how that they lose time and money in doing that, I think it's important for us to try.
Stacy, thank you very much for your help, your work. Please stay the course.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now we have academic degree programs for discussion and expedited action. First, we have 4 PhD programs to be offered at IUPUI, as we discussed this morning. And so I'd like to invite Ms. Vibert, Associate Provost for Special Initiatives at Purdue University, to present these degrees. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity. First of all, I want to note I'm very pleased that Dean Simon Rhodes, who is the Dean of the School of Science at IUPUI, and Associate Dean David Skolnick, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Education, have both been able to join today. They're sitting right back there, and they'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. They'll be pleased if you approve these degrees. It is my distinct pleasure to present for your consideration for site-specific approval for more Purdue doctoral degrees in the School of Science at IUPUI. Addiction neuroscience, computer science, mathematical sciences, and physics. Like the 2 previous doctoral degrees that you have approved, these degrees represent a long-standing partnership with the respective departments at Purdue West Lafayette. Originally established as a mechanism to jumpstart doctoral education at IUPUI, the faculty in these 4 programs have worked collaboratively with our Purdue West Lafayette faculty on admission of students, on preliminary qualifying and final examinations for students, and as co-major advisors for students. The IUPUI programs have grown and prospered, with graduate students placed both in academia and in industrial and corporate settings. The IUPUI faculty in these programs have established research records and grants that provide funding for almost all of their students. These programs offer distinctive opportunities for doctoral education with unique faculty research programs and many connections to the companies in the Indianapolis region. All 4 departments at Purdue West Lafayette are supportive of providing site approval to IUPUI for these doctoral degrees. The faculty at each location will continue to work together on various research projects and other collaborative opportunities. I present for your approval site-specific Purdue University doctoral degrees to be awarded at IUPUI in, again, addiction neuroscience, computer science, mathematical sciences, and physics. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Vibert?
Or for our dean and associate dean.
No. Yes.
It might be good for the dean to just describe quickly the volume of funded research that now comes into these programs in Indianapolis, with the encouragement and oversight of the faculty at West Lafayette, but the people on the ground in Indianapolis are attracting a lot of income on their own.
Yeah. So I would also like to thank the Commission for their time today and your consideration. In response to Dr. Bemko's question, the last 2 years we are having record years for funding in the School of Science at IUPUI in the $12 million range of external funds. That's, if you wander around our campus, you'll see a brand new science building there that we built without a dime of Indiana taxpayer money, and that reflects some of that research success. There's lots of reasons for us to be in support of this transition. I think the 2 I would emphasize to you today are student success. for the graduate students, the doctoral students involved in these programs, what this transition means, for example, is that they will be able to pick the committees that have the right composition, both for to support their research, to advise them correctly, but it also will be people that are really willing and able to do that, and that will keep them on a better track, and they'll finish in a more timely fashion. The second aspect of student success is that in the School of Science and at IUPUI in general, we involve our undergraduates in our research to a great degree. And so this transition will also continue to enrich the research emphasis and that environment that's available to those undergraduates. And we're very proud of the rate at which they do undergraduate research. A few weeks ago at commencement, we graduated 765 graduates with STEM degrees from our school. Our undergraduates stay in Indiana at a clip of about 85 to 90%. So putting those STEM graduates with research experience into the Indiana economy is something we're proud of. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. And for the record, would you provide us your name and your position?
I'm Simon Rhodes. I'm the Dean of Science, and I'm with David Skolnick, who's our Associate Dean for Research and Grad, and he's the one that does the research numbers. That's why we're doing well.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Dr. Sauer, with the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, and indeed these programs were discussed in the working session. I would note that all four of these programs are closely associated with the core health and science mission of the IUPUI campus at the research scholarship doctoral level. I would also note that these four programs are the last of the Purdue programs in the School of Science that were to be reviewed by the West Lafayette campus in the context of site approval for IUPUI. With that, I would offer the staff recommendation, which is that the Commission approve the PhD in Addiction Neuroscience, the PhD in Computer Science, the PhD in Mathematical Sciences, and the PhD in Physics, all to be offered by Purdue University at IUPUI. Be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Ken? There's been
Second.
move of approval for the 4 PhD programs. There's been a second. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The 4 PhD programs are approved. Thank you very much. And now we have another academic degree program on the agenda for full discussion. And I would like to invite Dr. Michael Rushton, Associate Vice President for University Academic Affairs and Director of Strategic Planning from Indiana University, and he's going to present the recommendation.
Good afternoon, and thanks very much for the opportunity to come and bring forward this degree to you, and thanks also to Dr. Sauer for the work he did with us in preparing this submission. This is a PhD in American Studies. I'm joined today by Professor Raymond Habersky, who is a professor of history at IUPUI and the director of American Studies programs. He will be able to answer any detailed questions about this degree. I'll just say a few things on this. I know time is short. I will say this is an interdisciplinary degree, and so it will draw upon the expertise of faculty across the liberal arts who can contribute to the American Studies degree. This is commonplace, I believe, amongst this kind of degree. One particular factor in this degree that's worth noting is that the intent is not that all of the students will be pursuing an academic career with their degree. Often with PhD programs, that's what most students are going to do, is prepare for a career in academia. But this degree is meant to prepare students for other career types as well in terms of research, media, public service, the nonprofit sector, foundations, and so on. In that respect, this is unusual for a PhD program. It actually includes internships, which of course is consistent with the Commission's own strategic plan, but it is something rare to see in doctoral programs. If I can give one brief anecdote, this is perhaps similar to IUPUI's doctoral degree in philanthropic studies. through the Lilly School of Philanthropy, where also you have students pursuing a doctorate, but not necessarily for an academic career. Indeed, some years ago, I had the pleasure of serving on a dissertation committee in that school for a graduate who, in the end, decided not to go for any kind of academic position, nor did she ever take one. Instead, she wanted to work in the arts field, and now, of course, Jane Chu is the chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, and so a very distinguished graduate of an IUPUI program where, again, not pursuing an academic career, but instead going into public service. So thank you again very much for your time, and I will let Professor Haberski answer any detailed questions about this program, should you have them.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, staff recommendation. Oh, we have one. John.
I read quite a bit of this. Why don't you call it a doctorate of liberal arts?
Sure. That's a good question, because the field of American studies is better defined in the proposal than liberal arts. It's American studies tells you what the focus is. It's about the United States. It's about American life, American culture, American ideas. And liberal arts does not do that. And liberal arts also includes classics. It includes language. It includes disciplines that are not part of the purview of this particular program, but will use the expertise of people in the School of Liberal Arts. So it absolutely depends on them, just not all of them.
Does that include, does the liberal arts include economics?
Yes.
Does it?
Yes.
I'm a proponent of the free enterprise system, and I didn't see anything in here about that. I noticed a lot of information on international studies and so forth. Does that get covered?
Covered in
the free enterprise system?
You mean for-profit corporations?
Well, I know most of this is like for-profits and government work and so forth, but I just wondered in the curriculum, is the free enterprise system?
Oh, if it's covered in economics, it's covered in this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good.
I mean, it's part of the American system.
Yeah. Okay, but I just didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, the curriculum is not, it's tailored to the type of internship that the students are going to do. And so not all of them will have the same exact curriculum. So it was hard for me to peg particular classes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'd have a question. I read somewhere in here, I thought, I can't find it now as I'm looking, comment on the quantitative skills that are required for somebody with this degree.
Right.
And the data research. Could you explain those a little bit?
Sure. What we're looking at is trying to cover three basic research methods areas. So qualitative, quantitative, and digital. And so students who come in with an MA, perhaps, who have quantitative skills will need to do more in the qualitative area. Or vice versa. They come in with a history degree, but they have very few quantitative coursework, they'll take quantitative courses. So it will be part of the expectation that students will have all three methods areas before they move on.
Explain to me what qualitative is.
Qualitative would be primarily sort of analytical, so looking at how cultures have changed over time. You can use a variety of ways to do this. You can do it historically. Take a look at how Indianapolis has changed from the 1970s to the present. You can look at it through survey data, where you do interviews with people. Anthropologists are quite astute at that. Sociologists often do that. In the same sociology department, you'll have people who do quantitative studies. And so they'll have quantitative methods for their students and qualitative methods. And so our idea is to have the option for students to do both. Yeah.
When you say digital, tell me what that means.
So these days, it primarily means using everything from sort of high-level video creation to website design to data mining, learning how to use actually Google more effectively, and bringing digital presentation skills to bear on the type of work that they want to do. It's not simply enough to research it, you have to present it, you have to sell it.
Tapestry.
Any more questions? All right, thank you very much, sir. Dr. Sauer? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, and indeed this program was discussed in the working session as well, and as Dr. Rushton has indicated, it's notable that this program is an applied interdisciplinary program that, relies on internships as an important part of the curriculum. Although this point was covered this morning and is referenced in the agenda book, I do want to repeat for purposes of the public record that it is the Commission's understanding that this program does not represent the leading edge of a series of standalone discipline-specific doctoral programs in the liberal arts that would be brought forward for this campus. And with that, I would offer the staff recommendation, which is that the Commission approve the PhD in American Studies to be offered by Indiana University at the IUPUI campus. Be pleased to respond to any questions.
Any questions?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve and second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It's been approved. Congratulations. And we have 2 academic degree programs on the agenda for expedited action. They are listed on your agenda book on page 59. I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And then we have one more item. Each fiscal year, the Commission sets a spending plan for the following fiscal year. And staff has prepared this spending plan for approval, and it's been distributed to members in advance. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It's approved. We have information items in our booklet. Oh,
So we did.
We did this.
We did
we
it.
did the expedited.
He did.
We did the.
Oh, thank you.
You had 4 questions asked of you, don't you remember?
I thought there were some more I had overlooked. But. So then, is there any old business? New business? The next meeting of the Commission will be held on August the 11th. And that will be in Muncie, Indiana. We're going to Ball State. If there is no other information, then meeting is adjourned. And remember, we have the meeting for the deciding of a slate for our next officers. And we'll get direction from Liz as to where we're going to meet.